Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The J Reels Podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, inching closer to September as we're just 2 weeks away from Labor Day. Can you imagine? Yes, summer is slowly starting to set on the horizon, but we still have pretty much a month plus of the summer season. But right now, it's about delivering another passion-fueled podcast to cover all of what's happening in sports, as this is the J Reels Podcast with your host, J Reels. For my first-timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And of course, I have some housekeeping before we commence on this latest edition. For starters, I have a new vlog on the YouTube channel at JReels, which, yes, not really a sports-driven vlog, although there are tinges of the podcast that I discuss some trials and tribulations when it comes to producing a podcast on the road outside of the friendly confines of my little home studio. But overall, the first part of my two-part series, Escape to Florida, with the first part being in Orlando/Kissimmee, Florida. You definitely want to take a look at it. If you've watched me on my Instagram live streams over the last few weeks, I talk about an injury that I suffered exactly 1 month ago today. At this time, on July 19th, I was hobbling around trying to figure out what the hell happened to my foot, as I haven't been running, as I'm recovering from, believe it or not, people, a broken foot. So yes, you can get all the details on my latest vlog. I visit some family, my son, my grandkids, meeting my granddaughter for the first time. Also my Airbnb, the digs there, which were actually pretty impressive, with a nice pool and gym, etc. So if you want to get a little bit up close and personal with yours truly, with my 9-day sojourn in Florida, but with the first part being in Orlando, and the second part, which is going to come at you Thursday, which will be part 2 Miami. And if you thought Orlando was going to be a little bit crazy with the developments that happen there, wait till you see what happens when I get to South Beach. So go to my YouTube channel at JReels. And of course, if you're watching the podcast on the channel, absolutely just click probably a couple of videos before, as I just posted it yesterday morning. And again, look out on Thursday, which not only the next podcast will come, but also the latest vlog. So you definitely want to peep that, as I would greatly and sincerely appreciate your support there. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, etc. You know the deal when it comes to that. And of course, which I was remiss on my last podcast, but I have to bring up OLIPOP. DrinkOlipop.com, DrinkOlipop. It's a soda brand that is good for your gut. No high fructose corn syrup, non-GMO ingredients that you can actually read on the label. And with all the flavors that they have, the classics, whether it's cola, ginger ale, lemon lime, root beer, cream soda, as well as some different flavors, especially for the summer, watermelon lime, as well as banana cream. What? Banana in a soda? Yep, even banana, my good people, as well as a peaches and cream flavor. You also have plenty of others that you could certainly, for beating the heat this summer, go to your website, or go to your computer, I should say, and go to the website. Once again, drinkolipop.com, and save 15% off your order by using JReels at checkout. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate that as well. So if you could do that, I get a kickback of that. Buy a case, buy a couple, why not? Buy a dozen for your family, friends, foes, or even frenemies for that matter. Drinkolipop.com, save 15% by using the promo code JReels. All right, let's get right to it as we get closer to a college football season, which, believe it or not, actually starts Saturday. But I'm not going to get into the college football. I'm going to save that for next Thursday, which I'll have a preview. And we all know the NFL season, which really, for me, yours truly, will begin 3 weeks from yesterday. And as we do know, the season will raise its curtain 2 weeks from this coming Thursday. So we have that to look forward to. But right now, it's going to be about baseball, people, because that's pretty much the only thing that's happening. I can get into the NFL preseason, what's going on there, which I will later on. I'll get into the big UFC middleweight fight as well, the NBA schedule. I got all that for you here over the next maybe 50 minutes to an hour. But for right now, baseball, and I have to bring this up because as I was assessing the landscape of the sport, and yes, I can talk about all the races and what's going on here and there, and yes, looks like the American League may even go down to the wire. Same for the National League too when it comes to the home field advantage as well as with the American League. But besides that, 6 weeks from yesterday is the conclusion of the baseball season. And it makes you think, wow, just 6 weeks left, and what is going to happen as far as the wild card of the National League, American League, these division races. All right, maybe not so much in the NL Central where the Brewers could pretty much put their feet up as they have an 11-game lead on the Cardinals. But I have to say that will we have a baseball season past September 15th? And yes, I get it, you have a hotly contested AL East as well as a hotly contested even NL West for that matter. I'll bring that up. And we would think that the winner of the AL Central will be in Cleveland, although now the Twins and even the Royals have gotten close to where they're within striking distance of the first place Guardians. And even though you had a little separation there in the AL West where the Astros look like they're going to rule the roost when it's all said and done, as they now have a 5-0 and a 4-game lead on the Mariners. But with the AL wildcard, now you're starting to see some division there. And the NL wildcard now looks like it's going to be, dare I even say, 2 teams for one spot, that being the 6th seed in the National League. You may have a barren wasteland when it's all said and done when it comes to any type of pennant chase or playoff race for either wild card and the divisions like I mentioned, and of course we'll go through it. But just a month ago, we were talking about how the NL wild card was just going to be a fight to the very end where you had as many as 8 teams battling for 2 spots. And the divisions, although we had seen separation from the NL East, NL West, even though the Padres and Diamondbacks have cooled off a little bit. And as I mentioned, I think the Dodgers will be home free when it's all said and done. But right now, as I'm looking at the sport, you could arguably say that baseball could be in a scenario when you get to this time next month, not to say that everything's going to be wrapped up, not to say that it's all going to be a formality, that the pennant chase in the American League and National League is pretty much going to be set, where it's just a matter of who's going to end up with the top 2 seeds in each league to where they'll have to bye and then you'll have to worry about the wild card afterwards. I'm not going to go as far as saying that, but the likelihood of that happening as opposed to this becoming a race where now all of a sudden this team is inching closer or another team has put themselves in the thrust in the middle of things, because how I look at it, this is going to be a scenario where you may have your top 6 teams already, maybe not etched in stone, but pretty much have it written off to where all we have to do is just wait till September 29th when the season concludes and then have to usher in the wild card week to where we would think baseball, we may not see any meaningful games until the first week of October. And yes, people could say, what, Jay Reels, what are you nuts? Look what's happening in the American League East as we've seen all year long. Yes, I get it. We know what's happening with the divisions. We know what's the latest and greatest with that division. And now we could even maybe open up the AL Central. The West, I don't think it's going to be much of a fight there because Seattle, they had to salvage a series in Pittsburgh yesterday. And as we know, the Mariners look like they're not going to be able to get out of a wet paper bag as far as their offense goes. We know their pitching is good, but they can't really score runs. Mind you, they scored 10 yesterday, but still. And then in the National League, we figured the Phillies are going to be scot-free. We know what's happening in the NL Central. As the Brewers, you might as well just give them the division right this very moment here on August 19th. And then the Dodgers, I think, will, when it's all said and done, they'll be, again, the champions of the NL West. And then all you have left is the wild card, where the wild card as a right to second is not looking very juicy, to say the least. As we take a look at the American League, now the Royals have played very well here to the tune where they have the final wild card spot. And mind you, they are just a game behind the Twins for the 5th seed in the American League. And that's going to be interesting because whomever gets that 5th spot as a right to second, they're going to play either the Orioles or Yankees when it's all said and done. So they're going to have to go on the road. I don't know if they're going to be able to catch either Baltimore or the Yankees because they do have a 2-game advantage in the loss, but it's 2.5 back. Twins, where the Yankees are currently in that 4th seed in the AL wildcard. But with the Royals now having a 3-game in the loss and 3.5 over the Red Sox, and then Seattle 5.5 and 6 in the loss, and you can pretty much forget about it after that because I get it that the Rays are hanging around. They're also 6.5. I guess I have to throw them in just for this discussion, considering that they do have 2 games in hand on Seattle. But other than that, because you have teams that have a lot of ground to make up, and yes, is it insurmountable leads for Seattle, for Tampa, and mildly put for the Red Sox? No, they're not, because with 6 weeks left, you still have plenty of time, and the Royals, although they're playing very well, coming off a sweep of the Reds, and I don't want to hear about the Reds anymore, because the Reds who swept the Cardinals and were, 3 games back of the wild card, and a lot of people thought, all right, maybe the Reds, will they put themselves in a situation where they boosted them and have some confidence where they can maybe roll into September just a few games back? Not the case, and I'll get to the National League in a second. But in the American League, again, it looks like you're going to have a situation where in the wild card, it's going to be Kansas City or Minnesota trying to fight for that 5th spot to have the unenviable task to either play at Baltimore or at New York in the wild card round. And as for Boston, as they're trying to figure themselves out, having a rough week, and now they got to go to Houston here in this early part of the week. So let's see where they're at come Thursday, if they're going to be further back in the wild card. And then you have Seattle, as I've talked about, and Tampa, who impressive over the weekend as they swept the Diamondbacks. But still, they have a long way to go to try to even get close to the Royals there in the wild card. So yes, can I still talk about them as a right to second? I guess I have to, but I can't see them making any type of run to where they're going to be a threat here in the wild card mix. And then in the National League, as I mentioned, both San Diego and Arizona cooled off considerably. San Diego losing 2 out of 3 in Colorado. And then, as I mentioned just, 90 seconds ago, the D-backs, who riding high, same with the Padres, go to Tampa on their road trip to Florida because now, after getting swept out of the Panhandle, now they go to South Beach for 4 days as the Marlins will entertain them. And let's see if they could get back on the beam to maybe win 3 out of 4 and keep pace, not only just in the wild card chase, but also in the division behind the Dodgers. But as we know, both with the Padres and Diamondbacks having, I'm going to say, a good enough lead to the point where the Braves, who have the 6th spot in the National League wildcard race, they have both an advantage over the Braves, where the Braves have a 2-game lead over the Mets. And then after that, there's a precipitous drop. San Francisco, 2 back of the Mets, 4 back of the Braves, and losing 3 out of 4 to Atlanta last week was tough. They actually salvaged that series by winning the final game there out by the Bay. And then you have the Cardinals, who have really just fallen apart here. Now, they're 2 games under, 5 games back. Do I even put them in the wild card race? I'm going to say as of right this moment, yes, but in all seriousness, they are not going to be a threat here. And forget about the Cubs, Reds, Pirates. They have certainly fallen off a cliff. So just as I detailed at the start with this theme, how the wild card races, where a lot of people, including yours truly, were anticipating, oh, this is going to be crazy. It's going to be a just right down to the wire, where we may get to game 162, where you're going to have all these teams trying to battle it out for wild card spots, or even now division spots, which I'll touch on in a second. But you pretty much got nothing. Because the Mets, I'll touch on them right now. We know about their pitching staff. And this team, the only way they're going to win is if they hit. Yes, they're going to have to pitch as well. But nobody's going to be shaking in their boots if they do make it into October, or let's say down the stretch, where you have a rotation of David Peterson, Jose Quintana. All right, Luis Severino, give it up to him. He had a complete game shutout, the first complete game shutout by a Met since 2021. So that just goes to show you how long it's been, even with DeGrom and Scherzer and guys like that, even Verlander for a brief period last year. So that rotation with no Kodai Senga, and I'm not trying to make Senga out to be Bob Gibson, but for the Mets, how they've been piecing it together with this rotation, and we know about their bullpen. And yes, if they're not mashing the ball, this is a team that is going to struggle, and they get Starling Marte back to play right field, so no Tyrone Taylor and guys like that out there. And even though Marte had a hit there in his return, but is he going to be a guy, 35 years of age, third year of his contract, 1 year left? Is he going to be able to produce at anything close to what he did 2 years ago in his first year as a Met? And they're going to need his bat down the stretch because they're going to need some offense big time if they want to continue to stay in this wild card race. So who knows what's going to happen there with the Mets? I don't trust their rotation. And yes, they have gotten some just overachieving numbers from guys like Severino, even Sean Manaea. I know his last start notwithstanding, but still. So that's what you're going to have there with these wild card races. Not much to even speak of. And who would have thought a month ago that the division races were going to be more compelling and more riveting than the wild card? Because when we look at the Central, now the Guardians, I'm going to get to see them up close and personal this week because they invade the Bronx for 3 games against the Yankees. And I don't think the Guardians can hang with the Yankees. Even the Astros, I'm just going to give them their tap based on their track record here over the last half dozen years. And even the Orioles, for that matter, considering that they just played each other a couple weeks ago and the Orioles got a split of that 4-game series in Cleveland. So I don't know if Cleveland is going to be ready for prime time. We know that they're just a gutty, scratch and claw type team. They don't have a big time offense. We know their best offensive player is Jose Ramirez, and their rotation has been more than stellar considering that Shane Bieber had to be out for the rest of the year because of Tommy John surgery. Tristan McKenzie, their other right-handed starter, had to be sent down in the middle of the season. And you've had guys just be able to have big years and big seasons under their first-year manager, Stephen Vogt. But is it going to be sustainable in October? Because throughout 162 in a division that's actually improved, so I can't call it weak overall because you have 2 other teams that right now, who would have thought that at the start of the year that you're going to have possibly 3 teams, playoff teams, come out of the AL Central. If you would have asked me that on March 28th, I would have said, what are you smoking? So you may have that scenario, and with the Twins just 2 games back and the Royals 3 games back based on the Guardians getting swept over the weekend in Milwaukee, and for the Twins and Royals to have a streak, and the Royals, like I mentioned, sweeping the Reds here over the weekend in Cincinnati. So now you have a race there where who knows what could happen. And with the Guardians having to play in Yankee Stadium and the Yankees losing 2 out of 3 over the weekend, and Clay Holmes, I'm sure the Yankee fan has had enough of Clay Holmes, a far cry of Mariano Rivera, even Jabbar Chamberlain, if I want to throw him in the mix, when he was a setup guy in 2007. And yes, I know I'm going way back there in the Yankee time machine, but who knows with the Guardians? And I can't trust them 100%. And by the time we get to Thursday, after 2 games being played between the Yankees and Guardians, you may have a scenario where the Twins could be tied for first place, for all I know. So there you have that race, as well as the AL West, which I don't think is going to be much of a race. I think the Astros are going to be okay when it's all said and done based on what they've turned their whole season around, as I've talked about here over the last few weeks. But to me, it's all about October with them, what they're going to do this year in comparison to the last 2 years. And we saw them win the World Series, as we know, 2 years ago. And last year, just a weird postseason where they were unable to win a home game in the championship series, which obviously foiled them in making it back and defending their World Series title of 2 years ago. So I don't know, they're going to be a little bit unpredictable despite all of their success, but that's one just to keep an eye on. And at least we know that's a formality over and done with. Same for the Central. And then you have the Dodgers, who right now 3 games ahead of the Padres, 4 games ahead of the Diamondbacks. And as I've said before, with Mookie Betts back, and I understand Tyler Glasnow's now out with right elbow inflammation, and as if their pitching rotation hasn't been in shambles throughout the whole year with Walker Buehler, although he's been back nursing that hip injury, but he's trying to get himself on track. Clayton Kershaw, we get it that he's probably not going to be much of a factor, especially when you get to October based on his lack of success in the postseason. But whatever they could give him here, or whatever that he could give the team over the last 6 weeks of the season, without Yamamoto, without Glasnow, without Tony Gonsolin, I mean, they've been through the ringer there as far as their rotation. And then, of course, they had River Ryan. They're one of their young prospects. He had to be put on the shelf for Tommy John. So even with all that, And yes, we could talk about the Dodgers being disappointing because a lot of people thought they were going to win 105 games in their sleep. But yes, excuses are not to be said here, but injuries have certainly hurt their chances of running away with this division, considering how great the Padres and Diamondbacks have played pretty much up until this past weekend, as I mentioned just a short time ago. And that's what you have. I mean, I don't even know what else to add there. I wish I could say, oh, did you see what happened here? Did you see what happened there? And yes, when it comes to the sport, we get it that going back to the Yankees, they had that Little League game last night, Williamsport, which now next year you're going to have Mets-Mariners. Now that's a weird matchup. I can see Yankees-Tigers. They're two old teams in the American League that go back a zillion years. Mets-Mariners is your Little League game for this time in 2025. I don't know about that. That should be more division games or teams that have history, whether with one another or in the sport overall. Similar to what you saw there with the Rickshaw game a couple of months ago with the Giants and Cardinals for the Negro League celebration. So Mets-Mariners isn't going to have a good feel, if you ask me, at least right now. But that's for then, and this is now. But that's all I can really tell you with baseball before I get to the schedule. I mean, what more can I talk about? Mentioned Glasnow's injury and how he's had a big year. He's pitched a lot of innings this year, a ton of strikeouts. And obviously a lot of pressure is going to be on him to perform, especially in October. And not that he doesn't know his way around October, because obviously he's played for the Rays, who's made it into the postseason over the last handful of years. But between can I even get into Christian Yelich? All right, he's going to have back surgery. He's done for the year. He's been out since the latter part of July. But the Brewers, they have such a big cushion that you're not going to worry about them until you get to October. And this is a far cry from the guy who won a MVP back in 2018. And that's not to say that they're not going to miss his bat or his presence in the lineup. But let's face it, it's not as if Yelich has been tearing the cover off the ball the way he did back in the latter part of the decade previously. So you have that. And then Jazz Chisholm, I didn't mention this on Thursday, but IL with the UCL injury sliding into home plate. That could be a significant loss for the Yankees only because of the flamboyance and the attitude, even the swag that he brings to that lineup, especially when he first came over that first week from the trade between the Marlins and Yankees. So this is what we have, people. That is baseball in a big, giant nutshell. I wish I could add more. I don't want to be a Danny Downer when it comes to we may not have some meaningful baseball once you get past September 15th and everything that I brought up at the top of this particular segment, but I'm just calling it like I see it. This isn't clickbait, trickbait, people. This is pretty much what we see right now. Now, could it change? Could it be a situation where any of these teams, could the Red Sox catch on fire? Could Seattle do the same? Could Tampa? They can, but where are these signs? Where am I going to see them all of a sudden go, let's say, on an 8-game winning streak to where now they're a half game or a game behind the Royals for the final spot in the wild card? Or the same for the Cardinals? Really? The Reds? The Cubs? How about the Mets, as I just talked about? And the Mets, let's talk about them again from the standpoint of the schedule, because some of these series that you have here to kick off the week, and yes, Cleveland going to play the Yankees, that's a big one in my eyes, not only because they're two top teams in the American League and pretty much in first place, although the Yankees right now are not in first place because the Orioles have the season series advantage as to this very minute, but the Orioles are coming to play the Mets here over the next 3 days, starting tonight. And this is a huge series for the Mets. Because after this, come Thursday, they go to San Diego for 4 and then Arizona for 3 before a day off. And then they play in Chicago to face the White Sox. All right, we would think that's going to be a soft landing for them. But they have to win 2 out of 3 here. They couldn't get the sweep of the Marlins. Remember, they lost 2 out of 3 last week to Oakland. So I was hoping to get a sweep because I thought, going back to last Monday's podcast, that if they got 4 out of 6 before Baltimore comes in, all right, even if you lose 2 out of 3, you have a winning homestand before going on the road. Now, as it is, you're going to have to win 2 out of 3 against the Orioles. And not to say the Orioles have been on fire, because they have had their moments here over the last few weeks where they've lost some series. And series to teams that are inferior opponents. The team that comes to mind are the Marlins. Granted, it was on the road, but still, the Marlins beat them 2 out of 3. So it's not as if the Orioles have been bulletproof here over the last 2 to 3 weeks. But that is a big series for the Mets. They have to, absolutely must, win 2 of these next 3 games. because if they lose 2 out of 3 and then have to get on a flight to go to San Diego with a just tough 7-game stretch at that point, by the time they get to Chicago, let alone when they get back to New York, who knows? They could be 5-6 out of this wild card race, and you could pretty much say goodbye to the Mets for the rest of the year. So that's one series that I'm going, of course, zero in on being a Met fan, but I'm sure a big series nonetheless when we look at the landscape. Boston at Houston, as I mentioned, that's a big series for the Red Sox. They can't fall further back. They have to win 2 out of 3 by any means necessary. Minnesota at San Diego, that's an interesting series too when you take a look at how those two teams are fighting for playoff spots. Then you have Seattle playing the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium. Again, Seattle and everything that I've detailed and what they're trying to do to survive there in the AL West. We also mentioned the Yankees, again, said that 1,000 times. Other than that, that's what you pretty much have here. Now, as far as like the fringe teams that I mentioned, you have Tampa going to Oakland. You have the Angels going to Kansas City, so maybe they could continue their winning ways as the Angels come to town. You have Milwaukee at St. Louis. Now, please, St. Louis, even if they sweep, they're still 100 games back, so you can forget about that. Hey, here's a series. How could I not bring this up? Now, granted, if they're going to have any chance to be in the hunt for the NL East, Atlanta has to sweep the Phillies here, and I believe that's a 3-game series. Philly goes to Atlanta, so they have some home cooking there. No, that's a 3-game series because they do start their series tomorrow night. So with Philly, Atlanta, division rivals, granted that the Braves are 7 back in the division, maybe 6, let me double check that. They are 7 back, so even if they sweep, they'll still be 4 back. All the Phillies have to do is just win 1 game. So you do have some very interesting series, some intriguing series to start off the week and to sink your teeth into, and obviously I will get into all that come Thursday's podcast to see where we're at here as far as the landscape of Major League Baseball. Now, as I take a sip of water before I put on the helmet and shoulder pads to get to the NFL, and with 2 preseason games and the final stretch of the preseason schedule forthcoming, there isn't much that I'm going to unpack here. And yes, there are a couple of things that I will bring up besides a big signing. I don't want to say big as far as game-changing, but the Falcons have made a move here to fortify their defense, as well as the Vikings for that matter. But again, we don't expect the Vikings to do big things this year. But anyway, the one thing that I'll start off with, and because me being the Steeler fan that I am I concerned about the Steeler offense here after 2 games with the new coordinator and one Arthur Smith, a revamped line with a bunch of draft picks and pretty much piecemealing it together with draft picks here over the last year or so. And we know about the quarterback and Russell Wilson as well as Justin Fields fighting it out, although Mike Tomlin, the coach of the team, has stated that Russell Wilson has pole position. Well, he did play in his first game under center in a Steeler uniform and nothing really to write home about, although he was sacked 3 times where the offensive line has sprung leaks. They have scored 15 points in the 2 games, so the offense has not really mustered up much. Justin Fields, if you heard from his first game in the preseason, he had a couple of fumbles and did show some flashes of his brilliance, whether it was a couple of throws or just playmaking with his legs. Yes, we know the capability and the talent of a one Justin Fields, but as far as him being able to secure the ball and trusting him with the offense to go up and down the field, not necessarily at will, but you get my point, right now is dubious. And now with Wilson there, we know his age and we know that he has a resume and a pedigree, etc. But over the last few years, we've seen a slowly but surely a drop of his skills, not being that scrambler that he once was, not being a guy, as we all know, he's not big in stature, has taken a beating, especially in his last couple of years there in Seattle before going to Denver. And we know Denver, that experiment was an absolute disaster. But because they haven't been able to put up points, only 3 against Buffalo, should I think like, oh my God, this team is not ready or the sky is falling in Pittsburgh when it comes to this offense? It's the preseason, people. I'm not going to get crazy. I'm not going to be foaming at the mouth knowing that here we are, 20 days from the start of the season where the Steelers will raised the curtain on their schedule in the ATL, and that's going to be an interesting matchup, and I'll get to them in a second. But I'm not going to get just out of my gourd with thoughts of the Steelers and their offensive woes right now and their offensive line. I get it. Doesn't look good, but it's the preseason. That's like the guy who starts off, I'm just going to use baseball as an example. That's like the guy who comes into camp and hits 9 home runs in the exhibition season, and you have no choice but to bring him up to the major leagues. Like, wow, this guy came out of nowhere to hit 9 home runs. And then he gets sent down 3 weeks later because he's batting 190 and he's hit 1 home run and he's struck out a zillion times. I'm not going to take any stock into what happens in any preseason game, any exhibition game, none of it. So, yes. Is this Steeler offense going to be a juggernaut? Absolutely not. Is this Steeler offense going to be much more improved than what we saw last year? I mean, you can only think that's going to be the case between the three-headed monster of Mitchell Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and Mason Rudolph. Russell Wilson, you would think, is going to be at least a marked improvement over those three guys put together. But is this going to be Russell Wilson 2014 to 2018? Is this going to be Justin Fields, that game he had in the semifinal against Clemson? What was it, 3-4 years ago? Are we going to get that guy? Are we going to get that Russell Wilson? Absolutely not. So, one more time, people, wake me up on September 8th when the season begins, or the 7th, whatever that day is, no, it's the 8th, and let me see what the team's going to look like then and how it's going to shape up and how that offense is going to be performing at that time. Right now, I am not going in the least think that this is going to be a long season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's get a game. Let's get a couple games. Let's get a few games, a sample size to really delve into when it counts in order for me to assess whether it be the damage or whether it be the absolute complete opposite of that, to where that team, after 4 weeks of the season, lies and stands, and then you'll get a critique on whether or not I should be even overly concerned how this offense will perform. Speaking of offenses and quarterbacks that's certainly on the hot seat this year, Daniel Jones throws 2 interceptions, and I'm sure the Giant fans probably thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare of a season. I'm tired of Daniel Jones, ship him out. I'm sure that's what you probably heard here. If you live in the Northeast like I do, especially in the tri-state area, I'm sure you're going to have a ton of fans calling the fan to say, Daniel Jones, he stinks. I want him out of here. Get this guy in. Can we trade for so-and-so? And listen, again, preseason, the guy's coming off an ACL injury. He did take your team to the playoffs 2 years ago. Do I trust Daniel Jones in a big spot? Do I think that he's going to be the guy, despite the fact that he got a long-term deal a couple of years back, that is going to be a Giant for life? I'm not going to say that by any means, but it's just a preseason game. One more time, people. Let's see when this counts. Opening day, when the Vikings will come to MetLife, and if he's going to throw 2 interceptions and 1 for a pick six, then you can start to get crazy and just unload on your quarterback. But as of right now, pump the brakes. So, Atlanta. I want to talk about them only because we know about the trade that they made for Matthew Judon with the New England Patriots and how they fortified their pass rush by bringing him in, and he was disgruntled there with the rookie head coach, Gerard Mayo, that had a spat there in the opening days of training camp and then sat out, didn't suit up, didn't practice, got a trade, so he's in Atlanta. And then the Falcons also signed Justin Simmons, the former Bronco safety, to a 1-year deal. So now with Judon and Simmons there, and Simmons, who has 30 career interceptions, considering he's been in the league, 8 years now? This will be his 8th year forthcoming. But we know that the Falcons right now are looking like the team that is the favorite to come out of that division. And that may not be saying much because you have Carolina, a team that's still on the come up or still trying to build with a young quarterback on a one, Bryce Young. The Saints, yeah, there's some talent there, Derek Carr, whatever, but they may not be able to get on track. And then you have Tampa Bay, who did make it to the postseason last year, win a division, but it is Baker Mayfield. And yes, he does have his moments where he plays well, but can he build off of that? Can they capitalize on a weak division where right now it looks like it's going to be Kirk Cousins, and how if their offense is going to be tailored a certain way, whether they get their running game going with Bijan Robinson, and we know about their offensive weapons, the Drake Londons of the world, and the Kyle Pitts, the tight end, and Cousins, who goes in there with a handsome new deal. You would think in their sleep the Falcons would win 9 games at least and win a division. So bringing in some more reinforcements, they're going to need it. And then it makes you even think, is that going to be a sneaky team in the NFC? Considering the NFC is a bit top heavy, but not as top heavy as the AFC, that's for sure. But can they be in a discussion with the Niners? With the, dare I say, Eagles, Cowboys? I'll put them in half, slash. Now we know about the NFC North, the Lions. Guess you got to throw them in there. I can't look at them as a one-hit wonder because they've been building as well. 2 years ago, they won that final game in Green Bay to get a winning season, although they didn't make it to the playoffs that year. And last year, they were this close to going to a Super Bowl. So I got to put the Lions in that mix. Can Atlanta be a team that could be a part of that equation as a team that could not only just be sneaky good, but formidable in the NFC? I have to believe it when I see it, but they certainly have the talent to maybe make some noise in a weak division and in a conference that could be for the taking. Because with San Francisco, is there going to be a bit of a hangover there based on last year and then the whole Brandon Ayuk deal that's pretty much enveloped them throughout the course of the training camp and preseason? Dallas and their issues, as we all know, the Eagles, can they rebound with the Sirianni, Jalen Hurts rumored maybe disconnect there, especially after what happened at the end of that year, starting off 10-1 and then fizzling out in Tampa? Hey, why not? But again, I'll believe it when I see it. But that's what you have there with the football, and I have not watched Hard Knocks. I know that Caleb Williams has been a star in camp. He has been all the rage there, showing his talent, his playmaking ability. All right, let's see that in a real game, though. I'm sorry, because we could talk about how great he played against Buffalo and his last preseason game here, and we could look at the Hard Knocks video, and they could paint the rosiest and most coconut and palm tree postcard-looking portrait of how Caleb Williams is going to be taking the NFL by storm this year. And if he does, God bless him, similar to C.J. Stroud last year. But one more time, can we watch it unfold first and see how he plays before we even anoint him as the second coming of Patrick Mahomes, as a lot of people thought when he won the Heisman last year? I mean, really? But again, everybody prisoners of the moment. They got to compare quarterbacks or players to another great player in the league, or compare, the Michael Jordan of this sport. Stop it. So that's what I have there with the NFL. And also Stephon Gilmore signed a 1-year deal with Minnesota, who needs cornerback play in the worst way. So he will play there for 1 year. And coming off of a year in Dallas where he was thrust into the mix with Trayvon Diggs hurt. So Gilmore there, the former Patriot and one-time Defensive Player of the Year, now playing for Skull Nation there in the Midwest. All right, before I get to a couple of other things to wrap up, the NBA schedule came out, and I'm not going to go through every game and big-time matchup people. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pretty much highlight the Christmas games. I'm not going to get into that NBA Cup schedule, which I talked about on Thursday's podcast. To me, that is just absolute buffoonery. To even start to unpack that and really roll your sleeves up to break down what the NBA Cup schedule is going to look like over the course of that month from November 12th to December 9th for an in-season challenge that is rendered, come on, let's call it as we see it, meaningless. You think LeBron is thinking about his NBA Cup Challenge championship last year? Or the Lakers for that matter? Maybe Jeannie Buss. He'll break out the pom-poms. But anyway, I digress. But opening night, and I talked about this on Thursday, I thought you were going to have a combination of Philadelphia-Boston, maybe Milwaukee-Boston, but I came to the conclusion that, you got to have the Knicks go to Boston to start off the year to kind of get a feel, to almost, I don't want to say set the tone because it is a long NBA season, but where the Knicks stack up, because the Knicks fan, they are going to be pumped up, they're going to be geeked up, thinking that they're going to overtake, forget about the Atlantic, the division, but the entire East. And this is going to be an emotional game for the Celtics because, think about it, with everything that has transpired since the NBA Final, there now, as time flies, more than 2 months ago, June 17th is when they won the title. But with Jason Tatum not playing in the Olympics or not having a lot of burn, considering he was a champion in the first All-NBA team nod, Jaylen Brown not getting the spot that Kawhi Leonard left. And mind you, it went to his teammate Derek White. And of course, there's no beef between White and his teammate Jaylen Brown. There shouldn't be. It's not as if Derek White was trying to be the guy to say, I deserve to be on his team, or try to be a shill for his own self to be a part of the Olympic squad there that won the gold last Saturday. So Brown, he's going to have a little chip on his shoulder, and that could be a night with the banner being raised and the guys getting their rings, and yes, they're going to be all celebratory, but once the ball is tipped up, and I'm sure in the back of their minds, and maybe when Tatum and Brown get together on the sideline before they get to center court for the opening tip of the year, they may say, hey, I got shunned on the Dream Team, or this version of the Dream Team, by not playing. You didn't even make it to the Dream Team. People are doubting us already. People think that we can't repeat. Yes, we are the favorites going in. The Knicks are coming into our building thinking they're going to take our home court and our status of being one of the top teams in the sport. I tell you, not to say that that's going to be a hornet's nest that night, but I wonder whether or not they almost put the Knicks up for an execution. Wonder. Not saying that's going to happen or what have you, but that's going to start off your NBA season. Knicks at Celtics, which I'm going to be highly anticipating. And then the late game is who else? The Lakers, as they'll host the T-Wolves there. And then the next night, you're going to have the Intuit Dome, which has been open, as I saw over the weekend, where you had a comedian, which, I don't know, maybe there was a concert there prior to that, but I know Sebastian Maniscalco was at the Intuit Dome. And if you haven't seen pictures or video of it, you definitely have to check it out, because it is SoFi Light, SoFi Stadium, where the Rams and Chargers have their home games. To me, it's a smaller version of SoFi Stadium, because you have that Oculus, or I forgot what they call it. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. They already have a nickname for it, and it blows away. If you've seen the Mercedes-Benz Dome where the Falcons play, and they have that Oculus there in the middle of the stadium where it opens up the roof, this blows that away times 10. And remind you, we know SoFi is a huge stadium, and they have that circular scoreboard. This is, I believe, 16 or 8, I don't even know how many thousands of fans that the building will hold, but they're calling this a halo board. And the thing is not only just round and huge, just from the scope of the arena itself, but just the height of it. I look at it and I feel like, oh my God, I hope that thing is sturdy enough, because I can see that thing coming crashing down, God forbid, to the court. That thing is enormous. So I'm sure if you go on YouTube, you see for yourself. But the Suns will be the first team into the Intuit Dome, the state-of-the-art stadium. The Clippers will now have an identity in LA. Still going to take generations in order for them to do so, but at least they won't have to worry about having to cover the banners and cover the retired numbers. At least now they'll have their own home. Now they'll have a place where they could have their fan base go to and not have to be in the shadow of the tunnels there where it's going to be splashed with Lakers, and again, not having to look to the rafters and see the coverings of the tarp over the Laker garb, which understandably and rightfully so. So you'll have the Suns going to that building there to open up the newest arena in the sport. And then the Christmas Day slate, which is the banner day for the league, despite the fact that the NFL, of course, just has to completely crap on the NBA, a Wednesday, I might add, as we all know, and as I talked about in the past. But here's your Christmas Day schedule from start to finish. 12 noon, a little bit of a surprise, but I kind of like it. Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs will invade the Garden there, 12 noon, which the Knicks always play that 12 o'clock game at MSG. So you have Greg Popovich and company come to the Garden with Victor Wembanyama. That is your opener, followed by Minnesota and Dallas. As we all know, that is a rematch of the Western Conference Final, so that should be a very good game there. Philadelphia at Boston, all right, wasn't going to be the opening night game, but you knew it was going to be a game of some significance down the road. Well, that is your 5:30 game. No shock. Lakers at Golden State is your primetime game, and then Denver at Phoenix, a rematch of the opening round last year between those two teams. So you're going to have good games. You're going to have that 2:30 to 8 o'clock window, which the NBA, as we know, at least for the first hour, you can watch Spurs Knicks before watching Kansas City at Pittsburgh. And then the late game is what? Baltimore-Houston, if I'm not mistaken. Because the NFL only has the 1 and 4:30 window. They do not have a night game. Maybe they were trying to throw the NBA a bone there. Really? Like, people are going to watch the Lakers and Golden State? Maybe they will, because by then the game will be over, so at least they could polish off their eggnog or unwrap one last gift there as they're watching LeBron versus Curry for the 9 millionth time. So those are the games of note. And yes, I could go to some other games. We talked about it last week with Klay Thompson. His first return to Golden State or to the Chase Center is November 12th, which ushers in the Cup Challenge schedule. Big whoop there, as we know. And yeah, we could talk about a few other matchups there. But to me, that is the tooth and nail, or I should say the part of the schedule that a lot of people want to sink their teeth into, the opening night, who plays what. I mean, we could talk about when the Knicks and Nets play, the first matchup between the trade, Mikal Bridges, etc. Again, I'm not going to unpack that. That is, I'm not going to say insignificant, but that is, to me, small potatoes. It's opening night, it's Christmas night, and obviously the NBA is a slog when you start off there October 22nd, which is the date of the opening night, I might add, going through April the 15th. So that's what we have there with the NBA. And then now let me wrap up with a couple of other things before we bid adieu. UFC had a big fight there on Saturday night, which I watched. Yes, I talked about it on Thursday's podcast. Obviously, with the sports world being very mellow right now, and knowing that that fight was on the docket, and I would have been remiss, I would have been an idiot if I just thumbed my nose and be like, who cares? No, I invested the time, the energy, the effort leading up to the fight to see how it was going to go, and all I can say is this. Now, of course, I'm a UFC novice, as everybody knows. So I'm not going to wax poetic on me knowing the ins and outs, ups and downs, etc. This is just based on what I saw for the 4 or really 3+ rounds of that match. Israel Adesanya, I thought it was his match to lose. The way he performed, DuPlessis, I get it. He was trying to get him into those grappling and try to wrap him up and try to tap him out. As you see, DuPlessis, he is built like an ox. And for a guy who, with that size, and with Adesanya, who is as thin as a rail, and you could see the difference of their stamina, because Adesanya looked like he could have gone 50 rounds, where DuPlessis, he was already sucking wind after the second round. And the second round was big because I thought DuPlessis did win that first round. It was a little bit close. Maybe you could give it to Adesanya. That's fine. But I thought even with DuPlessis trying to get him into those holes, trying to get him to the canvas to the point where he was going to do his best to try to tap him out, because with Adesanya's quickness and obviously with his build, he wants to get into a street fight with him, more so with strikes and kicks as opposed to getting to the canvas and trying to wiggle his way out of that. And as he did in the second round, he was able to get out of a hold. And that's what I thought was huge, because if DuPlessis wasn't going to get another opportunity to do so as the fight wore on, it was going to be Adesanya to win. And as you saw there in the third round, was getting his shots in on DuPlessis, and even early in the fourth round where he was able to do so. But then came that flurry where DuPlessis had 3 strikes, where he dazed Adesanya, and then Adesanya was backtracking to the cage to the point where on that third strike, Adesanya went down, and then DuPlessis right away went into that sleeper hold, I guess what it's be called. I don't want to say choke hold, but he put him in a sleeper hold at first. It looked like Adesanya was trying to get out, and then as he really got into good position and got a better grip, that's when Adesanya tapped out. And who am I to say, he tapped out too soon? Waited, he wriggled his way out of his first go around there in the second round. Why couldn't he do so here? Obviously, he had expended more energy, despite the fact he wasn't sucking wind like DuPlessis. But I thought maybe he was going to get one last, whether it be an elbow or somehow just fight his way out of that hold, knowing that he was winning the fight. And for whatever reason, that hold was just a little bit too much for him. And he probably thought that even if I tried to break out of this, he's just going to put the clamps on even further. And again, because Adesanya is slender, does not have that big build like DuPlessis does, therefore, he lost by submission. And DuPlessis, who was the champ going in, is still the reigning champ going out. Will they rematch? Will we see another bout here at some point? I'm sure we will. But I won't go as far as saying that the fight was a little anticlimactic because I thought maybe Adesanya was going to win. But knowing that he tapped out maybe sooner than I would have liked, maybe not what I thought, but I would have liked, and considering that he did so the first time around, that he didn't put up much of a fight once he got to that point there in the fourth round, what are you going to do? I'm sure a seasoned UFC follower or fan will look at me, well, Jay Reels, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, listen, I watched the same fight you did, and I don't think it's as far off as what you've experienced or what you witnessed. But, all right, I'll give you the kudos. But all I know is what I saw, and I'm sure there are some people who probably feel the same way I did. But, hey, DuPlessis won. That's all that matters. Case closed, and we move on from there. And then lastly, the U.S. Open begins a week from today for tennis as I get my tennis racket out. And you're going to have a couple of omissions here as Marketa Vondrousova, who won Wimbledon last year, as you recall, she'll be out with a hand that's injured. I don't know to what degree, but certainly maybe not enough for her to grip and rip. So you're not going to see her there at Wimbledon. And then Cam Norrie has a forearm issue. So you have two of the top 50 who are ranked in the world. They won't be gracing Arthur Ashe or Billie Jean King Center there when the final Grand Slam of the tennis season will raise its curtain there a week from today. And then you have no Rafael Nadal, as we know, considering what he's gone through here over the course of the last, not only just few months, but really a year and a half. And even though he tried to give it a go there, as we saw just with the Olympics, him facing off against Novak Djokovic on his domain there at the Roland Garros clay surface. So you're not going to see Nadal. And then even Carlos Alcaraz, who's going to try to bounce back here, even though coming off of Wimbledon and losing in the final for a gold against Novak Djokovic. Well, the tournament that was in Cincinnati, which he actually played against Djokovic and lost last year, out of character for him as he lost, I believe, in the first round, smashing his racket, just pretty much unlike and out of his character to just have a meltdown there on the court. Apologized later on, saying that it wasn't me. He shouldn't have gone that crazy. But I guess because he did not play well, maybe, who knows, for whatever reason, he wasn't just mentally prepared or just even able to get out there. Not saying he has any mental health issues or anything like that. But, hey, who knows what was happening or what was going on. Took his opponent lightly. Therefore, he figured that as young as he is and all he has to do is flick the switch. And sometimes that's not going to be the case, even with a young stud like him, who's won 4 Grand Slams and looked to see if he could win another U.S. Open here in a couple of weeks. But for whatever the reason, certainly did not play well there in that opening round and certainly showed by the way he behaved and acted there on the court. Like I said, smashing his racket and just throwing a tantrum there. So tennis will be part of our consciousness next week, but just a little update with who will not be performing there once we get to Flushing Meadows. And a tournament that I'm looking forward to see how that's going to unfold there over the course of the 2 weeks following this past week once we get to the opening next week. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, and review on whichever podcast platform that you use, Apple, Spotify, the website, jreels.com. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. As I mentioned before, I have a new vlog. If you want a different side of yours truly, outside of me producing these podcasts or my shorts, the daily shorts. I know it's been slow recently, obviously, with the way the sports calendar is. It's just the dead zone that we're in right now. But once we get to September, that's going to ratchet it up big time. Whether you get my daily takes on what's happening in sports, the podcast. But no, this is a bit of a different twist, as you'll get that personal side on my latest vlog, first of 2 parts, escaping to Florida with family, friends, excitement, etc., and even an injury that I'm still nursing to this day. So definitely check that out. Please, I implore you to do so. Again, as we all know, independent content creator, doing this full time. This is my job, people, and I'm trying to generate some income and subscribers, followers, etc. So if you could please do that one more time, I would sincerely appreciate that. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J-Reels Podcast, Twitter, X, J-Reels1, just a number, as well as the old-fashioned way, the J-Reels Podcast at gmail.com. Hit me up. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, This is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, as I like to say. Talking sports since birth. Doing it with nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury. With my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J Reels podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the J Reels podcast, on the flip, baby.